Iron Blade Authors Unplugged. I'm so excited this week. We've got authors. We've got a full house, and we're from all over the place this week. So we've got Jade Lee and Jude Knight and Mary Lancaster with us. And Brenna Ash also has a release this week. It couldn't be with us, but I'll make sure I pop her link in the comments so you can grab it if you haven't gotten it already. But we're going to go in reverse order this week. So we're going to start with the last release first, and that's Jade's book. And it's the cover for this one. There was so much fangirling when we were sharing the series back and forth in teams, because she's just gorgeous. It's Temptress, and it's book 2 in Forbidden Pleasures. Can you tell us about that one?
This actually happened in the mid-1800s. A call went out to all the eligible young virgins in China to come compete to be the next Empress of China. Lord. And so you had to be virgin, obviously, and in the appropriate age range, and you had to be a Manchu, the daughter of a Manchu bannerman. Now, historically, there was, except for the emperor, there was no one in the Forbidden City who was male who wasn't a eunuch, except for the emperor. However, that would make for a very different type of romance. So I created a emperor's best friend who, because he was honorable and the emperor's best friend, he is in charge of all the virgins. And historically, there were 3 tests of purity that you had to pass. And there were lots of bribing of the eunuchs and all of this. And our poor heroine has been, she is not wealthy enough to do the big bribing, but, she's got some wealth. And the thing is, go figure, that she's been taught that being beautiful and honoring the Confucian virgins and having an artistic talent will make her that somehow the Emperor of Heaven, who is the emperor, the Chinese emperor, he's 18 years old.
Oh Lord.
And he's supposed to recognize her purity. Well, it occurs to her about halfway through or earlier that perhaps 18-year-old boys aren't really attracted by purity. So anyway, she needs help. She and the emperor's best friend, who is in charge of the virgins, realizes she has extra stuff to offer. And so they make a secret deal that he will help teach her and she will help him with some negotiations with the Dutch, because there was a lot of attempted, because he's still a political animal, blah, blah, blah. But turns out they fall in love. If they get caught, they're going to die. So we got a problem.
No stakes there.
No stakes there. But spoiler alert, it works out in the end.
Phew. I am going to giggle every time you say the emperor's best friend who is in charge of the virgins.
Not a place I expected to say very often.
Because the emperor's best friend is like that's a whole advanced level from brother's best friend. And then we get who's in charge of the virgins as well. So that's total t-shirt material.
It really is. Yeah.
There is no stakes with the emperor. So if the emperor wants to bed someone, the emperor gets to. But if you're not quite the emperor and you're in charge of keeping the virgins pure, oops.
There should be no deflowering. Well, there's so much to like about the stakes in the series. Like there's so much to love about this beyond just the gorgeous, throwback covers. And
I love the covers. I was really shocked when I saw them, and I was like, "Whoa, they wow!" Yeah. So shocked in a good way.
The storyline has that kind of feel to it too. Like that kind of all of it's on the line. This isn't a subtle regency where at worst he's going to lose his title or make an undesirable match. This is like full on.
And in case someone is confused, it is not sweet.
I think the number of times you said in charge of the virgins kind of tipped. I mean, it tipped me off to that. So.
Well, she doesn't lose her virginity until the end, but there might be some other things they do.
Yeah,
Might
well,
be.
that's a range. There's always a range.
Yeah.
How many more books in the Forbidden Pleasures?
Well, there's at least one more book planned, but I have some other projects that I'm doing, and so I haven't written that one yet. But never fear, it's on the list.
Awesome.
It's
And the Emperor will eventually get an Empress.
yes, but I mean, her fate is kind of already determined by history. So that would be like, marrying Prinny. That just, you don't go there unless you're doing an alternate history. So every woman I'm doing was supposed to or did compete to become Empress and then discovered true love. Because honestly, if you're 24, do you want to marry a spoiled 17-year-old emperor?
No, you do not. And if you do, then you need your women friends to talk to you for a little bit and explain to you why you do not.
Exactly.
An intervention.
Yes, an intervention. That's exactly right, Jude. That's what we need.
Well, and in book 3, the heroine did get selected for the lower harem, which is an even worse life because you never see the emperor, so you never get the option to get pregnant, which is the only power you have, is if you become, the mother of the next emperor. So she finds a interesting escape.
Oh.
Ooh, but no one ever leaves the Forbidden City. Once you're in there forever. Unless you marry the emperor's best friend or something.
The Emperor's Best Friend has just made itself its own new genre. It's like this is its own genre now.
Awesome.
I
like that. I'll start a new genre.
Like, why not? Awesome. The next book that comes out this week, or flipped order, is because Jude's going to be in the middle no matter what. Is Jude Knight's book, and it's Hold Me Fast. Every time I read this title, I go, oh, Hold Me Fast. And it's book 7 in the Twist Upon a Regency Tale series.
That's the novel 7. There's been a novella as well, but Hold Me Fast is inspired by legends from the borderland with Scotland, the borderlands, Scottish borderlands. The Ballad of Tam Lin is probably the best known, but there's True Thomas and Thomas the Rhymer and Tam Lane. They're all basically the same story. A young man with musical talent is stolen by the Queen of the Fairies and becomes her entertainment, both in bed and out of it. And she's not letting him go, except that in the Ballad of Tam Lin, the fairies owe a tithe to the devil every 7 years, and he's going to be it.
Ooh, that's a good position to be in.
So, but a girl he meets, or depending on the version of the legend, a girl he knew as a child comes along, and in some versions of the legend, they have a nice little chat, and then 7 months later, her father wants to know who the father was. So
somebody was not in charge of the virgins in that scenario.
Absolutely. She denies. She says she's not marrying any of his knights, but she will marry the knight that impregnated her, but she has to save him from the fairy queen, so she heads off to do that. And in the legend, he gives her instructions about pulling him off his horse when the fairy queen rides by on Midsummer's Night.
Oh.
And tells her to hold him fast because the fairy queen is going to turn him into all kinds of things: a wolf, a snake, a river. But if he promises, I won't hurt you, but if you hold me fast, then I will be, in the end, I'll become human again and yours. So that's where the title comes from.
Ugh, I love the title so much. I just love the title so much.
And of course, being one of my twist tales, there's no magic. The fairy, the roles are reversed. The fairy queen is a earl who is a patron of the arts in his own terms, but what he has actually done is taken this young singer, aged 16, from her family in Wales and seduced her, got her addicted to drugs and alcohol, and generally mistreated her for 7 years. So when her childhood sweetheart comes to London after she returns from a tour, an international tour, and he finds someone who really needs his help. So childhood love affairs aside, he's going to help a friend. So he's a stand-up guy, my Joan.
Mm.
And I had great fun with the little elements of the story. I played a what she calls a shell game with horses to get her out of the pack, and eventually she's pursued by the earl. He doesn't want to let her go, and eventually he has a close encounter of the nastiest kind with Bodmin Moor. So that was quite fun to write. And
I love when the bad guys get their comeuppance.
oh yes, and boy is he a bad guy. So I really do like my villains a lot. So that's the basic story. I think it's one of my favorites. It's someone who, having read the blurb, still said, oh, it was quite dark in a in a review. Quite surprised me because yeah.
It's hard to
Sort
make a
of.
drug addict and heroin light, you know, like I mean, that's,
Yeah.
It had its light moments, I hope, but I've had the loveliest of reviews in which a reader basically said that it's just beware that it's one of those books that when you read it, you will never forget it. It will never leave you. And I thought, oh.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Hold Me Fast.
Yeah.
It's the 7th. The 8th is November, and it's much lighter. It's a Princess and the Pea retelling.
Oh, fun!
The Trials of Alaric. And then I've just recently signed a contract to do 4 more next year. So a twist upon a Regency tale will continue. I'm currently writing Jackie's Climb, in which a young lady goes out to sell her mother's cow because they need to pay the rent.
Love it.
So
I love this series. I'm so glad we're getting more of them. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the first book that came out this week, which is actually the last book, and let me just mention Brenna's first two. It's No Rogue Like You, and it's book 3 in Rogues of Redemption. So if you haven't had a chance to read that one, I'll make sure to put the link in the comments so you can grab it too. But the first book that came out this week, and the last book that we're talking about, is Mary Lancaster's book, and it's The Rake's Mistake. That's a great title too. The Rake's Mistake. And this one is book 6 in One Night in Blackhaven.
That's right, yeah. So it's the second last book, and the hero of this one is the youngest of the grown-up sons, the youngest of the grown-up brothers in the family. So he's been in all the other books too. He's been ill for most of his life. He's had serious asthma, and he's only recently begun to get his strength back. And being in the country helps him a lot. He's always lived in cities, which are always dirty and polluted, and especially London, which is pretty horrific at that time. So he's finally getting his health back, kind of discovering life, and that women like him, and he's having a ball. He's having a blast, you know. He's really enjoying himself, drinking, women, lovely. And then one day,
Great
at
behavior.
indeed, indeed, but he's maybe getting a bit. He's 24 when the book starts, so he's maybe getting time. He sort of at least grew up a little bit and realized what he was doing. So there's that element to it. We do see him grow up a bit as time goes on. But his one night in Blackhaven at the ball, where all the other brothers and sisters met their matches, he sees this. Everyone thinks she's the most beautiful girl they've ever seen. And she, in fact, first came into the very first book I wrote for Dragonblade, which was Vienna Waltz. And she was the younger sister of the heroine, and the heroine of that book, her great plan was to look after her sister until she could have her magic London season and hook a really rich, kind guy who would look after them all because they didn't have a home at the time. And that was their plan. Of course, things didn't work out that way. But she's still absolutely ridiculously beautiful, and everybody wants to be seen with her or to marry her or worse. Anyway, they think she's pretty good stuff. But she eventually falls in love inevitably with Aubrey because he's different. She's never met anyone like him before, and he's very reluctant to settle down. He really likes her, but he's not sure he wants to stop raking about the place and having a great time. So until he finally decides that he does, when he realizes he doesn't actually want to hang out with an old flame. He thinks, I don't really want to, but he falls asleep being a pisshead, and then he's seen the next day leaving her house. And of course, the worst is thought, for once, he's not actually guilty, but he ends up in trouble. So, and then he has to set about trying to win her back because he realizes that she's who he wants to be with, and that he doesn't actually care about all the others or is that way of life. He wants to hang out with her. So it's quite a sweet story.
Oh. Well, it sounds like a sweet story. Yeah, I'm glad he recovers from his mistake.
Yes, well, we would have to, really, I think.
It doesn't work out as a romance if it doesn't work out that way.
Exactly. But yeah.
And there's one more in the One Night in Blackhaven series?
There's just one more. It's The Spinster's Last Dance, which is the oldest sister's story. The spinster of the title, indeed, and she's 30 years old and decided she's on the shelf, so she decides to have her one last dance at the same Blackhaven ball. But things don't quite go the way she thinks they will.
She's not going to stay on the shelf, I think.
She's not going to stay on the shelf either.
Awesome. Well, there's something to look forward to, and the book sounds lovely. Yeah,
Thank you.
I love a hero with a good arc. Yeah, so a good character arc there.
Yeah, good development, I think.
Yep.
Grows up.
Awesome. We just have a few more minutes before we're done, and I thought I know Jude uses fairy tales as the inspiration for this series in particular, but I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the inspiration for your series. Mary, yours is all set, what is it, 7-book set over one night kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Jade has the virgins coming from everywhere. I thought we could talk just a little bit about inspiration and where it comes from for you all. And whoever wants to dive in can just
I'll start. Years ago, when I was not very little, but when I was young, my mother told me the story. We got some of the things from her family in China, and one of them was an inkstone, a carved inkstone, and it had a dragon on it. Now, at the time, she claimed that she always called it my uncle. And, this was, it would have been like a great uncle, but whatever. She says, my uncle was a soldier during the fall of the last empire, or the last Chinese empire before the, anyway. And when the Empress Dowager was fleeing, he helped her flee, and they had a lovely, lovely little interlude. And as payment, she gave him this inkstone. Well, years later, we found out that an imperial inkstone has a 5-toed dragon. and this dragon only had 4. So that might have been a slight exaggeration, and I'm sure no other young man would ever exaggerate a conquest.
I think I would totally keep that story. I don't think I would tell anybody about that. I would paint a toe on that dragon. Yeah, it's a good story.
So, that always kind of, it was like, okay, I was younger. So it was like, why was she fleeing? And, there's all she fled on a jade barge, and does jade float that much? And, all the stories and who was chasing her. And I just thought this was fascinating. And so, and then you learn more about the Forbidden City and Imperial China. And it just, so eventually I had to write that tale. The minute you find out that there was a contest for virgins, then, how can you not write that?
No, there are stories there waiting to be told.
Like, there you go. So that was my inspiration.
Well, that is fantastic inspiration. Like, and I would totally keep the Forte thing to yourself and just keep the story. That is a great story.
Well, the fairy tales, obviously, and they've been a lot of fun. But in this particular book, I think I also, once I realized that in order to get my sort of stolen by the fairies experience, and I thought about the music world, I kind of went down in a rather darker path than I had originally intended. But part of the reason for that is that when I was a young mother, I was writing computer software manuals, which is kind of somebody I knew at the time called it a prostitution of my talent, which I have always treasured. I actually made money out of writing.
I have done software manuals too. That is hard, difficult work.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, there you go, a prostitution of your talent. Yeah. That's hard, difficult work, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So one of the guys we found out was a pretty serious drug addict, and he and his wife had 2 children. He had the younger one was his, and she actually died in drug withdrawal.
Oh.
And so we did get quite close for a little while there, and I kind of had a look at what that world was all about and how enticing it was and how difficult it was to leave. And then the other one was one of my daughters broke her pelvis when she was pregnant with her first child, and went through some pretty tough times and was on prescribed hard drugs for quite a long time, and also went through withdrawal. So that was, in some ways, the book is a tribute story for those 2 very, very brave women, both of whom were prepared to go through one of the hardest things a human being does for the sake of their children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and you're looking for a comparison to a fairy world that has both the things that are compelling and draw you to it, and then also the darker side that I think we tend to forget about when we think of fae and in our.
We've kind of sanitized the fae, but folk tales are not kind and gentle.
Mm.
No.
So, and the fae of the folk tales are capricious, self-centered, and often very mean.
Yeah. Yeah, but I admit that as a comparison, it makes sense, and it's a very interesting way to bring that element, the story into your story. So,
and I think that's what we do, isn't it? So we take all the experiences in our life, and they form the ingredients, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think your author's voice too, because there aren't really very many original stories, but there are very many original voices, and hearing the stories through your author's voice, which comes from your life experience and your perception of the world and the way you move through things, I think is huge. Awesome. Very
Thank you.
cool. All right, Mary, you're up.
Well, after all that, I don't know. Mine's just a bit of light-hearted escapism. I've got no dark side of it, or great stories of Chinese emperors or empresses indeed fleeing. I just really sat down when I was thinking back to because my editor of the time wanted another series set in Blackhaven because the first series had been pretty successful, and I was thinking, how would I make it different? Because I didn't want just to do exactly the same thing. I wanted to do it a wee bit more, make it a different series, maybe a wee bit later, and have different people in it and stuff. And then I came up with this idea of what if they all went with the same ball, and then they all went their own ways after that and had different stories. So it was, just went on from there. It was just flowing along, really.
I think challenging yourself is really cool too. To set them up in the same place.
I love your villains, Mary. They are just so utterly self-centered.
I think that's what makes a good villain, is that we got absolutely no empathy for anybody else.
And then they can continue to think that they're the good guy, because they don't see that they're not
deluded. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do love the idea of as an author challenging yourself, because there has to be something that tickles your brain too, that makes you excited about the story that you're telling. And
yeah, so it was very different for me because I had to keep much more track of things because I'm a bit too much of a pantster. I don't plot properly, and this sort of made me to some extent, or at least I had to take note of where everybody was and when everything was happening. So I had my little timetable set up, and as long as I remembered to put things in it, I was okay. So I think we got there, more or less.
I tried to do that with my Lords of the Masquerade series and failed, because the first book, our heroine is accused of murder. And so then the second book, I can't have it the same masquerade party because everyone would be talking about the murder.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. Yeah. So hats off to you. Kudos for doing it, because I failed. It's still a good series, though.
It is a good series. It is.
Well, and there's nothing like 3 books in and realizing that you've forgotten some important thing, or some important part of a character. So.
But it's as a reader, it's a real treat to see something that is just being referred to in passing, and you think, oh yes, I remember that. It's it's neat.
Yeah, I love that.
Some other character in the rake in the rake's mistake, he's a bystander as someone gets shot, and of course we all know who got shot because we've read the earlier stories.
Yeah, but he doesn't die, so it's easier to
No, that's right.
No, but you're right, Jude. There is something about that, like reconnecting yourself to the story, and I think that's one of the reasons that we love series so much, because we get to see where the characters end up after they've gotten their happily ever after, and it's like family reunions. You get to get bits and pieces of them as you go.
And you see someone else's perspective on them because you're in the point of view of a different character.
Yeah.
Yes, which is always fun.
But in Mary's case, they can't show up in the next book pregnant.
No,
they can't. There wasn't enough time.
It's all at the same time. Yeah,
isn't going to work in this situation.
There's always epilogues. Epilogues are great.
That's true. There you go.
3 years, 5 years.
Well, ladies, it was a treat to talk to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I love hearing where your stories come from. I love having a chance to listen to you talk about your characters and the process. It makes the books come even more alive for us, which is really a lovely thing for you to do. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I'll make sure I put the link to the books in the comments so you can grab them if you haven't got them. Here's the used salesman, the used car pitch. If you get Dragon Blade books on pre-order or release, it's your very best deal. It's cheaper than a bad cup of coffee, like even a really bad cup of coffee. So there's no reason not to jump on it. Pre-order and release period. And if for some reason you were busy and you didn't, you can always read in Kindle Unlimited. So, ladies, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank